Anyway, we stayed in these here tents there with very minimum straw on the floor and one blanket per person. And the old Germans, they'd come in the morning there with their guard dogs and that, and if you didn't feel like getting up, you holler, "Ein man krank," that's one man sick. Well, they kind of bypass you in that there, but we didn't have very much to eat there either. I lost between 30 and 50 pounds during my incarceration. And anyway, our duties for the outside was nothing but a slip tent with a slip trench with a log over it. We had water once a day. We had no showers or facilities for cleaning up. And the first bat that I really did get was in January. They had a Quonset hut set up with cold running water in it, and they had a bucket of creosote to delouse yourself with. Well, when you use that on your private parts, that ain't too good. So anyway, we got deloused there, and that was the only bath or that we had during my time that I was in till the end of the war. Well, the end of the war, I don't know whether I missed anything or not. The end of the war really ended on the 27th of April of 1945, but I wasn't relieved until the 8th of May. Well, I think the Russian army, for one thing, my birthday was the 9th of May, so they give me a birthday present. And the first thing that we heard coming in, well, I get in my head now, going back to the time in prison camp, there was nothing but barbed wire in that, and of course we tried to escape a couple of times, but they had guard towers all over, and they'd shoot down the barbed wire fencing and that to keep you in, and then they had a little plane we called Bed Check Charlie. He used to circle the area there to make sure that nobody got out of there. But anyway, one morning we got up, and all the guard towers and that was empty. Well, we knew then what was coming off, so in the distance we could hear the tanks coming. Well, we knew they weren't German tanks because they sound different. By God, here comes a lead tank. It had a great big Russian woman in it. She was the major, she was the commander of that tank brigade that was coming in there. And the first thing she done was knock down the guard towers, and the other ones come in and knocked all the barbed wire and that down. So we knew that it wasn't going to be long. So we kind of scattered out around the country, and 3 miles from where we were in camp, Hitler had a youth camp there. Well, we confiscated a bunch of stuff out of there, but I never did get to bring it home because 3 days out of New York, somebody stole the whole works that I had. So anyway, getting back to the camp and that there, we got back to the camp there, and the big old Russian general, he come in there strutting around, and they didn't know what they were going to do with us. Well, we lulled around there for a couple days. Well, finally an American officer finally caught up with them, because at that time it was decided who was going to take which section of Berlin and Germany. Well, the English took one slice, and the Russian, they took the middle slice right into Berlin, and the Americans were to the right going into Berlin. Well, the reason that they done that there is because that Russian army was the one that drove all the way from Stalingrad to the point where the Germans had gotten the war between the Russians and that, and they drove them all the way back into Germany. So that was decided before they went in there.
Okay, sure.
Getting back, I kind of getting ahead of myself here, probably trying to get this thing over with here. But anyway, we left Southampton and we went up the Rhone River, which leads up into France itself, was where D-Day and that started. And also the Germans had scuttled a ship in there to try to keep the Americans and that from going through, but the ship went with the tide and they just went around it, and then we went into Le Havre, France. Anyway, going back, now while we were in the boxcars, we had a little guy from down in Iowa, Decatur, Iowa, who later turned out to be a commander of the state of Iowa POW unit down there, and him and I were quite friendly, and I contact him and talk back and forth to him now that I'm home, and also people from New York and Washington and that. but that's getting a little ahead of the game now. So anyway, that camp, as I say, used to be a garbage dump, and it was the worst stinking thing in the summertime that they'd ever seen. And we lost a lot of people over there when the Russians, a lot of people don't know it, but the Russians took some of our people and they used them for slave labor, but they were later released. And also, during the Battle of the Bulge, when we was captured, they had what they called the Malmedy Massacre. I don't know whether any of you people have heard of that or not, but them people were taken 50 miles, the American soldiers, and they were slaughtered by the German army. The part where the German, or the Russian, and the Americans got together and they decided that they would leave us, be turned over to the American people. Well, we had 2.5-ton American trucks come in there, Studebakers, and of course the Russians, they had all their Lend-Lease was from the United States, and they also had Studebaker trucks. So at first we didn't know what they were, but then we found out that we were going to be loaded on them trucks and taken over to the Audubon Highway and down to an airstrip. Well, while we were on the Audubon Highway, as one of the best highways that they had in the European theater at that time, we was given a salute by a P-38. Come down, swoop down, give us the old sign, and away he went. Well, that made us feel pretty good. Then we knew we was headed in the right direction. So anyway, we went down to this makeshift airport, and we were loaded on C-30 cargo planes and flew back down to Camp Lucky Strike down in France. Well, the Camp Lucky Strike was a rehab place, so we was all stuck in the hospital down there and checked over to see whether we were all right. First meal we got was, boy, peanut butter, jam, sandwiches, and we thought we really had it made. But come dinner time, after we got out of the hospital, they had chicken. Well, Jesus, I like chicken. Well, you think you're going to eat a lot, but you take about 3 bites due to the fact your stomach was all shrunk up, and that was the end of the chicken. But it was appreciated anyway, and during our time there, they treated us real good. They give us whatever we wanted. And then a little while after that there, we was taken down to the pier there, and we was headed back for the United States. I come back on a luxury liner. We was the lead ship coming back, and this was a ship or that they had captured from the Italians during the first part of the war. And of course, I forgot to tell you that the ship that I went over on was a sloppy sludge ship that was the Russian had. So I went over on a Russian ship, and it was the filthiest thing you ever seen. But the one that we come on back home on was just like living in a hotel room. And coming across the Azores, we seen dolphins and whales and everything else. Well, I got back here and we landed in Pier 13. It was the same pier that I left on. But then they shipped us over to Staten Island to get deloused and get a new set of clothes. So after we was over there a while, then they brought us back over in the country here, and that's the time I come home for 30 days. So.
Okay. Now, did you stay in the Army much longer after that, or how much longer did you stay in the Army?
Let me out.
Sure.
Well, I come home. Well, I come home and visited the family and that. You can kick it on.
It's on.
And I was home for 30 days. Of course, we got married by proxy. Well, I was still in service. Well, then when I come home, we had to get remarried, and I got remarried on the 21st of January of 1946. And anyway, I was home for 30 days, and after that time was up, I went down to Jacksonville, Florida for more convalescent and that. And then from there, as I say, they didn't know what to do with us, so they started shipping us over to California. Well, I got down to Texas, and train turned around and brought us back, and I ended up down in Camp Pluchet, New Orleans, Louisiana, and I lulled around there. That was a transportation outfit, and they wanted me to rejoin, and I figured, well, I don't think so. So I was there for about a month, and then I went in and I signed up for transfer back to Indiana so I could get home on weekends. Well, then I signed up for a discharge, and the old man called me in, and he wanted me to stay in. He said, well, how about a promotion? I said, no. I said, I've already signed up for discharge in that. And I said, I think I've fulfilled my duty to the United States Army. He said, well, he says, I think you probably have. He said, but we would probably like to have somebody like you in. So anyway, one day he called me in, and he said, well, he said, you can sign your promotion, you can sign your discharge, or you can sign your transfer. I said, well, I said, I think I'll take my discharge. He said, well, haven't you reconsidered? At that time, I told him I reconsidered ever since I was in a POW camp, and I'm not senile yet. So I think the best thing for me to do is head for Janesville, Wisconsin. So anyway, I got discharged, and then we, another guy and I, we went down to New Orleans, Louisiana, and got us a hotel room for a couple days down at St. Charles Hotel. Well, then he ended up in Illinois, and I got home here, and then I went to work down to General Motors. It wasn't too long after that, but the idea was to get back and get the country back on its feet, because hell, the people of my generation, all we knew was to work anyway, because I worked ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I used to carry water around to the people in Thrashing and that, and later on I worked in a pea vinery. Well, then when I got home there, I went down to General Motors there when they had the second shift on the truck line. Well, they got kind of horseshit down there once, and a bunch of us walked out. I was on the unloading dock, and about 11 of us walked out of there. I figured, what the hell, I survived the Germans. There ain't nothing they can do with me. I wasn't afraid of any of them because we had dealt with the SS troopers. Well, then they called us back, and we went down there, and it was shortly after that the truck line quit running on the nights, but then it started up right away in the latter part of that, and then I worked there for 31 and 7/10 years, and I retired out of there in 1978. I had 53 and a half years in General Motors. For me is my young life when everybody worked then. They learned to work, and they learned to take care of themselves. And when I joined General Motors down here, we didn't have to belong to a union, but being from a union family, my father was a union man. He was a mason contractor, and my brothers, they all belonged to the union. So I joined the union at 50 cents a month is what we paid union dues at that time. And later on, my experience was that these people, after a while, they figured that, well, I'd make a good union representative, so I got into the union. I started out as a alternate committeeman, and then I was a committeeman, and I was a committeeman for many, many years. I was also vice president of the union down there, and I was also the president of Union 121 during the interim time when Elmer Yenning, who used to be our president, he would join the international and that there for the international contract. And later on, we pulled a good one too. We were supposed to be going out on strike because they weren't getting any place with the corporation. Well, Mr. Alley took his lunch bucket and I come home. Nobody else went. Well, I said, they told me that there was going to be a strike, so superintendent called me back. He says, you home? I said, well, who in the hell do you think you're talking to? He said, well, we didn't go on strike, Al. He says, could you come back? So I says, yeah. He says, I'll be back. So I went back and I walked right in, and just as if nothing happened, nobody said anything, but they were all putting the shit on me for walking out. I said, well, I said, the hierarchy, they didn't tell us that we wasn't going on strike. I said, and I go by what the hell the word is. So I walked out. Yeah, they got quite a kick out of that. Anyway, on my experience as a POW, I want that now.
Well, yeah, you know, how did that, you know, did it affect you later in your life? You know.
Oh yeah.
And then